Hello, my friends, thank you for visiting my travel channel again. Today I will show you part 2 of the London River Thames Boat Tour, which I made in June 2022.
Well, good afternoon once again, folks. Welcome aboard the old London Rose. We're now on our way down to Greenwich. So, this is what we used to call the docks. But as I said, there are no docks in London anymore. So if you look on the right, these are the original warehouses. Now, if you'd have come on these boats 30 years ago, you would have been looking at rat-infested derelict warehouses. Today, you're looking at rat-infested luxury apartments. Now the rats will never move out of this part of London. They've now got central heating, and if you look on that lower walkway, they can choose a different restaurant every night of the week. All this land belonged to a man called Terence Conrad. It now belongs to his son, the designer Jasper Conrad. Now, there's a hole in the wall on the right, we call it Dockhead. It hasn't changed much. 100 years ago, that's what it looked like. Reason I know, because I was here then. But halfway up it bends round the corner, that's called Jacob's Island, and that was the home of a man called Fagin and his lair of child thieves. So if you've seen the original black and white film Oliver, that's where they've done the location work. But look inside of us now, the new way to live in London. Buy yourself a Dutch barge. Then you get up here and then you realise you might have made a mistake. The big barge is over there, see the black and brown one, the second one. Barges that size, they pay £40,000 a year mooring fees. But when they sell their boat, they sell it with the mooring. So about that size, they're kind of like that up bigger. They're selling it for £800,000. Just got to find men with a dog, I suppose. Now, as we travel down, you'll see we do lots of tour groups on here for architects, because this is the best view you'll ever get of London. Every architect in the world has come here and put his stamp on a building in London. Some of them, I'm not quite sure what drugs they were taking, but others are quite nice. So look on the left, the glass building, see the round penthouses? The little penthouse that sits on the top, that's the master bedroom. The level underneath it, with its own running track round the outside, that's their front room. When it was built 12 years ago, that was sold at £7.5 million. It's now up for sale for 14 million. The only rich person over there, he's the window cleaner. Now look on the left where the trees are. We filled in the lock entrance when ships got too big. The biggest ship to go in there, we'll see later, called the Cutty Sark, where she delivered her cargoes of wool. But look at the lovely house on the far side. See all the security cameras round the bottom and the blue conservatory on the back? Well, that corner house is the home of Dame Helen Mirren, the famous actress. Behind her house is a little white marquee. Behind the marquee, a pub stuck on the side of Oliver's Wharf. The pub is called the Town of Ramsgate. In the 1700s, it was the Admiralty Court. Judge Jeffreys sentenced pirates to their death in that building, taking them down the stairs you see over there on the left. At low water, they went for their last walk. So look ahead on the left, the last building's got 3 red balconies and the letter E. That was Execution Dock. Now the execution was called the Grace of Wapping. It was very simple. At low water, we chain you to the riverbed, and then we leave you for 36 hours. If you survive, you're a very lucky man. And if you drown, nobody cared anyway. The building on the left, the blue and white one, is not a casino or a nightclub. That's where they repair police boats. Now look further along the left, you've got the police pier. Thames River Police are the oldest uniformed police service in the world. They were founded by the East India Company to combat piracy and thieving on the river. Well, the other ship owners paid for protection, so they created the River Police. And then 25 years later, we started the Land Police, the Bow Street Runners. Now look on the left past their pier and you'll see a little pub which is very busy. The Captain Kidd. He was the last man executed at Wapping in 1701. Now if you like English beer, that's a nice little pub. Sam Smith's Brewery. They used to brew in the little warehouse next door. It's not Witherspoon's. So as we travel now, if you look along the right here, you can see the different architecture. You see that wonderful white building? That used to belong to a man, the whole building, called David Bowie. He owned all that section of London at one time. Didn't do it any good. Still died. But if you look on the right, there's a lovely little church, St Mary's of Rotherhithe. Buried in there is Captain Christopher Jones. Now he's called the Forgotten Captain because no one remembers his name. Keep looking on the wall to the right, you see two big yellow warning signs. Past them, the British and American flag, and a little pub called the Mayflower. Christopher Jones was the captain and the owner of the Pilgrim ship. It was built here in 1620, went from London round to Plymouth to pick up the pilgrims. Now you see the weather vane? That's a replica. Remember the size of the Golden Hind? That's how big that ship was. When she set sail from the Scilly Isles, she had 120 people on board. Now keep looking on the right, there's a blue warehouse. Just past it is a little garden, but there's a brick wall in between. Look down the side of the wall, you'll see two grey figures. The pilgrims who missed the boat. This is Pilgrims Park, dedicated to the men who built the Mayflower. They became the crew. They never ever came back home to England. They're now working in Disney World. Everyone works in Disney World. Now look around you, you can see how the river's changed for us. See look, no ships, no tugs, no barges, no work. It's quite amazing, even in my short lifetime, I've seen this go from quite a busy river to nothing. There is no commercial work on this river. In actual fact, if it wasn't for tourists, there wouldn't be anyone on the river at all. On the right is Southwark. Southwark Council weren't interested in the docks, they just wanted to get rid of them. So when the property developers come along in the 90s and they said we're going to tear down all them ugly old buildings because we want to put up our ugly new ones instead. On the left, Tower Hamlets, they kept all their ugly old buildings. If you want to buy one of those apartments there today, over £2 million. You see where it says Metropolitan Wharf at the top? That penthouse you can rent on Airbnb for £3,000 a night. See the little white pub on the left? The oldest pub on the river in London, the Prospect of Whitby. It opened in 1520 when Henry VIII was on the throne of England. Now this is where you would have found pirates, smugglers, murderers, members of parliament, and even prime ministers having a crafty drink. It was in that pub they actually captured Captain Kidd. He was trying to escape the country dressed as a woman. The reason he got caught, he wouldn't shave off his black beard. If he'd have been alive today, we'd have took no notice of it. Now I don't know if you've noticed on the way down, we've passed some big building sites on the river. There's one on the left. Basically, we are upgrading London's sewers. We were extremely lucky. 140 years ago, an engineer called Joseph Bazalgette, he designed the sewers of London. When he designed them, we had 2 million people in London. Now we've got 11 million. they can't cope. When we have torrential downpours, the rain goes down the sewers, they all overload. Whatever floats in the sewer comes in the river, raw sewage. So these areas we're building, these are massive drains. The sewage will go down the drain, and where you are now, we're just completing the longest tunnel we've ever built under the Thames. The Tideway Tunnel is 17 miles long. Starts at Putney in the west, finishes at the sewage farms in the east. So look at this big old building on the right. Look at the way it was built, right against the water's edge, so it was easy to unload little ships and barges. Look on the top, there's its original name, Globe Wharf. The word wharf is disappearing on this river, it's not upmarket enough. That word means warehouse at river front, because that's the way they were built. See what we built next door now, look. Luxury apartments, private houses, somewhere to leave the old 4x4s. Look how many people were out there enjoying what they paid for. But this is what Docklands is all about. You don't see anyone. Now, over on the left, they're all original buildings, but they're privately owned. See the first one, the tall yellow one? The man who owned the penthouse wasn't happy with that, so he built a glass one on the top. But all his neighbours, look, everything they build is in glass. Glass isn't a solid object. You can build whatever you want. So even your house, you can build a conservatory on the back. No one can moan about it. Now on the left, there's a little pub. See the red and white building?
Yeah.
One of Gordon Ramsay's overpriced restaurants. Now that is Regent's Canal there. See where it says Limehouse Marina? At the back of that building over there, the yellow one, there's a little canal called Regent's Canal. And if we went on it with a little boat, we could take you to Little Venice in North London, Paddington. From there, you join the Grand Union Canal, then you can travel to Birmingham and Manchester. The journey from London to Birmingham is 3 weeks, providing you don't stop at every pub on the way. Now, if you've seen that TV series, Peaky Blinders, when they came to London, they came here to Limehouse. They met with the Jewish gangs. What they don't tell you, this area was Chinatown, the original. So this is where we had the opium and the gambling dens. Now they're all up behind Trafalgar Square. But look on the left, you've got a little pub with 3 balconies called the Grapes, where Charles Dickens wrote his novel, Our Mutual Friend. The man who owns the pub lives in the house with the gold statue. Can you see his naked friend outside on the grey post? Well, that's the home of Sir Ian McKellen, or Gandalf. He and his neighbours bought the pub. It went up for sale. They bought it to keep it as a pub. If not, it would now be a private residence. So in front of us is a brand new city. This is known as Canary Wharf. Now, what you must remember, this was being built as the financial heart of Europe until we decided to leave. Where we've just come from, the City of London, that's what we call the old money. Down here is the new money. Look at the tops of all the towers, you see the names of all the robbers from around the world. Now the building up there with a pyramid on the top, where that was built is where we unloaded the goods from the Canary Islands, hence the name Canary Wharf. Now when we left Europe, we was also told that the financial institutions was also leave, which didn't turn out to be true, because the building on the left, the modern one with the triangular frame, it's only a year old. That is now the headquarters for the Bank of Hong Kong. It wasn't a bad deal really. Boris got a free holiday in Hong Kong, we got a free tower block in London. Fair exchange. It's where he's going to work soon. Now further along on the left, that tall glass building is called the Landmark. At the moment, it's the tallest block of privately owned apartments in Europe. In April this year, they put apartments up for sale. They start at £650,000. For that money, you get a wonderful one-bedroom glass box overlooking the garage. Now, the funny thing is about the building, apartments on this side cost 10% more than the apartments on the other side. Now, the only reason I can put that down to, the view to west is where all the rich people live. The view east is where all the poor people used to live. But if you live on the banks of the Thames, you're not poor, believe you me. Well, you are, till you pay your mortgage off. Now, when Canary Wharf was working, 200,000 people worked in this part of London every day. Lots of people bought apartments. Because I don't know if many of you remember, a few years ago, all our pensions got wasted. So they said, if you want a quick eye on your pension, buy an apartment. So if you was working here, you bought an apartment. You came to work on a Monday, you stayed in London till Friday afternoon, and then you went back home. Well, when COVID came along, everyone went home on Friday afternoon, but no one ever came back. And the biggest problem these big companies have got now, no one wants to come back. We've all got used to sitting in our garden too much. So the deal they're being offered, you stay at home and work, but you lose your London allowance, which does sound a bit harsh. But when you work out how much you pay to commute into London, you're not losing any money, you're gaining back your sanity by not being stuck on a train for 2 or 3 hours. But if you look over there, a majority of those apartments are empty. Lots of them were bought when we was all locked up because they were bought as investments. So if you do this thing Airbnb, you can probably get any one of those apartments cheaper than a hotel room in London. The reason so many people are leaving London, apartments around here cost as much as nice detached houses in the countryside. Now, when I said 650,000, that's the starter price. That building, the landmark, as you go up, it's about £5,000 a floor till you get to the top, and that's when you think about stepping off into the next world. But if you look around you, this is the story of London. If you think we built a lot here, if we were to turn the boat around Westminster, gone west, up there near, I don't know if you heard of Battersea Power Station, they built 20,000 apartments there. All of the new embassies are being built at Vauxhall. So if any Americans on board, if you need to find the American embassy, it's at Vauxhall. Donald Trump didn't like it because there's a moat all around the embassy and they wouldn't let him in, like most of us. So, if you look around, folks, this is the story of London. Wherever you go, massive apartment blocks. You must remember, before the 1950s, there were no tower blocks. These were built to take people out the slums. Well, these ones on your left, the 4 identical ones with the grey square roofs, my grandparents lived over there. You only lived in Docklands if you worked or lived here. So my grandparents, the men all worked in the docks or on the river. Our mums were all secretaries who worked in the city. So in the 80s, a very nice lady came along and she said, how would you like to buy your horrible council flat? Because no one else wants it. So that's what they did. They bought their council flat because no one else wanted it. In the 90s, when Canary Wharf started it, everyone wanted it. And if you want one of them today, you're looking at £500,000. I'm only sad to say, my granddad sold out years ago. So we're on the way to Greenwich. Now, when we get there, folks, we literally unload, load up and go back to London. If you want to do the round trip, just stay on board with us. Now, when the boats leave Greenwich going back to London, they will only stop at the Tower and Westminster Pier. If you've got to get back to the other piers, you have to make sure you're back in London before 5 o'clock. Now when we get to Greenwich, I say we're going to turn around and we're going to go back. So we're not too far away, so I'm going to give my voice and your ears a little bit of a rest for a few minutes. There's no point me keep telling you how much these apartments cost. If you want to have a good laugh, just Google how much do apartments cost in Docklands. Just make sure you've got someone with you to pick you up when you see the prices. Well folks, if you look up the river there, you can see how London used to look before all them ugly tower blocks appeared on the skyline. If you look in the middle of Tower Bridge, you can see the post office tower. In the 1970s, that was the tallest structure in London. At the top there was a revolving restaurant until someone decided to blow it up. It's now called the BT Tower, and it's always used for lots of events in London. Now, to the right of there, you see the Dome of St Paul's. You can see the height of the building, but it is hard to believe nowadays that was the tallest building in London. It's not anymore, as you can see. So look around you, this is how London is changing. We've even taken over the riverside now with all these private yachts and boats. Now you look at some of these boats and you think, I wouldn't want to live on any of them. When you go inside, some of them are ultra modern apartments. Others are kept as original barges. But the further up the river you go, the more expensive they become. If you go to Chelsea Harbour, that's where you'll find all the Dunkirk little ships. But these ones down here, this mooring here has only been here 5 years. It took them nearly 10 years just to get permission to moor the boats up there. But now we don't, as you may have noticed, we don't have, the only barges that go through London now are taking rubbish. The ones that you've passed today, all going west, they're all going to the collection sites in the west of London, and then a little later you'll see them going back down the river with rubbish barges they filled up. All of our rubbish is now incinerated. We're not allowed to use landfill anymore. So,
if you like my videos, please like and subscribe to my channel. Leave comments below if you have any suggestions. Thank you very much.